If you have been investing for a while, you probably already know that the S&P 500 is one of the strongest long-term performers in the world. It is diversified, resilient, and has even gotten the seal of approval from Warren Buffett Gong Gong himself. The S&P 500 has produced an average return of around 10% a year over the long term, which is already very impressive. However, if you want higher growth, the three ETFs that I'll be sharing today have historically delivered even stronger returns than the S&P 500. To understand how powerful this difference can be, imagine starting with $50,000 and investing it for 20 years. With the S&P 500's 10% average return, your investment would grow to about $336,000. However, if you had earned a slightly higher 15% a year, your investment would grow to about $818,000. That is more than 2 times the return. This difference could mean reaching your financial goals earlier or simply enjoying more options later on in life. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that you should replace the S&P 500. For many investors, the S&P 500 remains a reliable core holding because of its broad exposure and proven track record. Instead, think of these ETFs as possible additions to your portfolio if you're looking to enhance your long-term growth. But be warned though, higher return strategies often come with higher volatility. So, you need to be comfortable with bigger price swings along the way. And with that being said, let's begin with the first ETF, QQQM. QQQM is essentially the cheaper version of the well-known QQQ ETF. Both QQQ and QQQM track the Nasdaq 100, which is made out of the 100 largest non-financial companies listed on the Nasdaq exchange. But even though the Nasdaq is not officially labeled as a technology index, it behaves very much like one. That's because many of the world's biggest technology companies choose to list on the Nasdaq exchange rather than the New York Stock Exchange, since the New York Stock Exchange has more stringent listing requirements. As a result, the Nasdaq 100 ends up being dominated by many of the big tech companies that we know and love today. Over the past 10 years, the Nasdaq 100 has delivered an average return of about 19% a year, significantly outperforming the S&P 500, which only delivered around 14.5% annualized return over the same period. Okay, I don't mean only as in only 14.5%. To be clear, 14.5% annualized return is incredibly strong, but 19% is even stronger. As you might expect, a large part of this strong performance has been driven by many of the big tech names, such as Nvidia, Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, and Google. These companies have grown rapidly due to advancements in artificial intelligence, cloud computing, semiconductors, and digital services. In terms of sectors, QQQM is extremely tech-heavy. About 65% of its holdings come from the technology sector, followed by 17% in consumer discretionary and 4.9% in healthcare. While this concentration is what gives QQQM its strong growth potential, it also means that the ETF can be very volatile during market downturns, because tech stocks tend to fall the most when sentiment turns negative. A major benefit of QQQM over the original QQQ is its cost efficiency. QQQM has an expense ratio of 0.15%, which is lower than QQQ's 0.2%. The difference may look small, but over long periods, even a 0.05% fee gap can compound into several $1,000s, especially for larger portfolios. Now, some investors might ask whether there's an Ireland domicile version of the Nasdaq 100 that offers lower dividend withholding tax. Well, there actually is, and that ETF is CNDX. However, because CNDX has a higher 0.3% expense ratio and the Nasdaq 100's dividend yield is extremely low at only about 0.47%, QQQM remains the cheaper and more efficient option in most cases. Though, with that being said, the main advantage of CNDX is that Ireland domicile ETFs generally avoid US estate tax. So, if estate tax is a concern to you, then CNDX may be a better choice. In short, if you are looking to invest in the fastest growing names in the Nasdaq 100, both QQQM and CNDX will give you direct exposure to the companies that have been driving global innovation. It is a simple way to tap into long-term growth trends in technology, artificial intelligence, and digital transformation. Although you must be prepared for higher volatility that will come along the way. This is the easiest money that you will make all year. Webull is currently running a welcome promo, and if you have 10,000 SGD lying around, you can earn 280 SGD worth of free Apple shares just by depositing it into Webull and keeping it there for 90 days. And for my viewers who use my link, you will get an extra 30 SGD of Apple shares. That is 310 SGD in total, which works out to roughly 12.6% per annum if you analyze your return just for parking your cash there. And oh, the more money you park into Webull, the more daily interest you earn, where you can get up to 3.5% per annum for 180 days. So faster go and sign up to Webull before the promo ends. Links in the description below. Moving on, the second ETF on the list is SCHG, which stands for the Short US Large Cap Growth ETF. SCHG tracks the Dow Jones US Large Cap Growth Total Stock Market Index, which focuses on large cap US companies that exhibit growth style characteristics. Or, to be more specific, the index chooses its holdings based on several measurable criteria, such as projected price to earnings ratio, projected earnings growth, price to book value, dividend yield, trading revenue growth, and trading earnings growth. This makes SCHG a much more intentional growth strategy as compared to QQQ, which simply selects the 100 largest non-financial companies listed on the Nasdaq without applying any growth filters. This is where SCHG stands out. While it does hold familiar tech giants such as Apple, Microsoft, and Nvidia, it is far more diversified than QQQM because it is not restricted to the Nasdaq exchange. Instead, it also includes companies from both the Nasdaq and the New York Stock Exchange, giving it around 200 holdings in total. This broader selection allows SCHG to include strong growth names that are not available in the Nasdaq 100, such as Eli Lilly, Visa, MasterCard, and United Health Group. Many of these companies have strong and steady growth characteristics, and having them in the portfolio can not only boost the performance, but also help to reduce concentration risk. And that is useful because while tech has been the top performing sector for many years, no one knows which sector will lead in the next decade. And SCHG's wider sector exposure can help to create a much more balanced growth approach. As a result, SCHG holds a broader set of sectors. While tech is still the largest component at about 48%, you will also find meaningful allocations to other sectors such as healthcare, industrial, consumer discretionary, and even a small portion in consumer staples. This gives investors exposure to growth stories outside of pure tech, while still maintaining a strong overall tilt to growth. Despite the additional diversification, SCHG has still performed exceptionally well. Over the past 10 years, it delivered close to 18% annualized return, which remains comfortably above the S&P 500's performance over the same period. Another key strength of SCHG is its extremely low cost. With an expense ratio of 0.04%, SCHG is one of the cheapest growth ETFs available. Over long time horizons, even small fee differences can compound into a meaningful advantage. In short, if you want growth not just from tech names, but also from high-quality companies across multiple sectors, SCHG offers a more balanced and diversified way to capture long-term growth. But besides SCHG, there are also many other growth ETFs that you can look at, whether it is VOG, MGK, SPYG, and so on. But since all of them have delivered very similar long-term results, have almost identical expense ratios, and track nearly the same growth of large-cap growth companies, there's practically no difference between them. So whichever you pick, just stick to one and don't anyhow change here, change there. The third ETF on the list is SPMO, which stands for the Invesco S&P 500 Momentum ETF. Unlike QQQM and SCHG, which focus on growth characteristics, SPMO follows a momentum-based strategy. It tracks the S&P 500 Momentum Index, which selects companies from the S&P 500 that have exhibited the strongest risk-adjusted price performance over the past 12 months. Or, to put it simply, SPMO invests in stocks that have been going up the most recently. Because of this approach, SPMO's holdings will look very different from a traditional index fund. Instead of sticking to the largest companies by market cap, SPMO updates its portfolio twice a year to include stocks that have shown the strongest momentum over the past 12 months. This means this ETF will naturally rotate into whichever sectors that are currently leading the markets, whether it is technology, industrials, energy, or consumer discretionary. And right now, thanks to the surge in artificial intelligence and semiconductor demand, that leadership happens to be tech. In terms of performance, SPMO has done very well. Over the past 10 years, the ETF delivered close to 18% annualized return, which significantly outperformed the S&P 500. Not only that, because tech stocks have been exceptionally strong these past 2 years, SPMO has even outperformed both QQQ and SCHG. This is very typical of momentum strategies. During a strong bull market, the stocks that are already trending upward tend to keep rising, and it is this strong momentum that further drives the fund's performance. Looking at holdings, you can see this in play. Right now, SPMO's top positions include Broadcom, Nvidia, Meta, and JP Morgan Chase, all of which have been growing up strongly recently. As a result, the ETF is currently tilted toward 35% in technology, 20% in financials, and 14% in communication services. But this also means that the ETF can look very different depending on the market environment. For example, back in 2023, when the market was still recovering from its bear market lows, the momentum leaders were companies such as ExxonMobil, Merck, Eli Lilly, and Chevron. This is because energy and defensive stocks were among the strongest performers at the time, and the momentum index naturally tilted toward them. For investors who are more comfortable with a more active style of indexing and wants a strategy that adjusts to market trends automatically, SPMO can be an attractive option. However, there is an important caveat. Momentum does not equal growth, and it does not perform well in every economic environment. That's because momentum tends to perform best during the expansion phase of the market cycle, which is similar to what we are experiencing right now. But if the market enters into a slowdown or contraction, the momentum strategy can often struggle. But that does not mean the momentum strategy is unreliable. In fact, over the long term, the momentum factor has consistently outperformed both the broad US equity markets and the MSCI World Index. The key is understanding that momentum is cyclical. While it can deliver very strong returns during bull markets, investors must also be prepared for periods when it lags. So, whether SPMO fits into a portfolio depends on your investment strategy. If you prefer a strategy that adapts quickly to changing market trends and you are comfortable with higher volatility, momentum can be a good addition. But if you want something that is more stable or more predictable, then simple growth ETF may suit you better. So those were the 3 ETFs that outperformed the S&P 500. Anyway, that's all for this video. Hope you found it useful. Like, share and subscribe as I'll be posting every week.